I walked up to Teth Adam while he was sleeping and I used my regular key energy sword and I said I can't afford to be wrong as I held my blade to Teth Adam's throat and then he woke up and I said you are the only one worthy to take the throne of Kondak. You saw all the bad that happened to your people then and I know you wanted to change it and even prevent it from happening again. I'm asking you as a man, protect your people, do it for your son just as I do everything for my children. I know you're not a hero but you have the heart of a king and believe me I know a king when I see one, and the throne of Kondak awaits. And then Teth Adam stood up and I said you are free to go, please use your powers to protect your people. I will be around if you need my help. Teth Adam, see you later. And then he decided to leave peacefully and then right after I teleported back home, Waller decided to threaten Black Adam anyway and then Superman went to talk to him about joining the Justice League and then he refused of course and he said I'm not a hero, I'm a king boy, and besides you already have a very powerful god looking after your people, ask him for help. And Clark said so you're really not going to help us? And Black Adam said no, I was never going to help you anyway, my only obligation is to my people. And then Clark said what if the world is in danger? And then Black Adam said if it comes to that then I will do whatever I must do to save the world and my people. I'm not working for the Justice League. Superman, now please leave my temple. And then Superman flew away and then Superman came to tell me about everything that Teth Adam said and I smirked and said I knew that would be his answer but trust me Clark, he's on our side. And then Clark said Bruce, it doesn't sound like he's on our side. And I said well did he say he wasn't? And Clark said no but he didn't say he's on our side either. And I said well maybe he's still considering his options. And Clark said yes maybe. And I said Clark, if you don't mind I'd like to rest with my wife. And then Clark Kent asked me to be his best man at Lois Lane's in his wedding and I said sure Clark, I can do that unless someone else wants to be your best man. And then Clark said Lois is pregnant and we are expecting a child soon, actually 2 children. And I said congratulations Clark Kent, you're going to be a father soon. And then he said the wedding is in a few days, is there any chance you could ask Zod to attend the wedding? And I said yes I could do that for you my friend and I will see you at the wedding. And then Harley Quinn asked can I be one of the bridesmaids? And Clark Kent smiled and said yes you can Harley Quinn, I'll ask Lois Lane about making an exception for you. And I said yes Clark Kent, make sure she's a bridesmaid please. And then I went back to Krypton not just to invite Zod to the wedding but to see how he's doing. And then I was surprised to find out that a lot of Kryptonians went back to Earth to procreate with human women and Zod even has a human wife from Earth and she's pregnant and beautiful. And I was surprised to learn that the name of Zod's new human wife is Chloe Sullivan and I noticed she looks just like Jennifer Lawrence and I smiled and I said interesting, it seems you decided on Earth woman for your lover Zod. And then Zod smiled and said I am going to marry her soon, she's wonderful and she meets all my requirements. And then Chloe elbowed him and he said I meant I love her very much and I smirked and I almost laughed and I said I would like to invite you and your soon-to-be wife to a wedding, it's a friend of mine, you know Kal-El. And Zod said yes I know Kal-El, he's the son of Jor-El. And then Zod said I will attend the wedding but so will his parents. And then I looked at Zod seriously and I said you did it? And Zod said yes I did, I cloned his parents and they have all their memories of him and everything. And I said send for them now please sir, Clark Kent will want his parents on Earth with him. And Zod said I will make sure his family receives the message and that they are invited to the wedding to witness their first and hopefully final marriage. And I said I will see you there, please make sure his parents come to the wedding Zod. And then everything was set up and for a big surprise. And then at the wedding Clark was surprised when he saw his parents alive again and then his mother volunteered to give him away at the wedding and Clark Kent hugged his parents and cried and he said it's so good to see you both again, I'm glad that you're both alive again. And then Zod said I am so proud of you my son, you have done well and I see Lord Rao has been reborn again. And then Clark asked how do you know him? And Jor-El said well my ancestors were the best of friends with him, I guess that's just how it is with Rao in every generation, he's always very good friends with the people in our family tree. And now I suppose it's you Kal-El that he's friends with. And then I walked up to Jor-El and I said hello Jor-El.